he's Lakota and Lakota. And their family settled over here in Morley, Alberta, just outside of Calgary. So he was a medicine man, and in 1995, when we were preparing for the Sundance again, the medicine man, John Stevens, went into ceremony, and apparently he had been told by the spirits that somebody else would have to behold the Chanupa. Somebody else would have to lead the Sundance that year. And me, I basically felt, just as I felt good just to be able to Sundance with the people there. And everybody was wondering who the Sundance chief was going to be, who was going to pass the Sundance pipe to. So while we were holding a meeting, all of a sudden the chief passed me, the Sundance chief passed me the pipe, and said that the spirit said that I should run that dance. And at that point I said, well, geez, I didn't feel right about it. I felt that a Chihuahua National Shuswap Sundancer should have led that dance. And they passed the pipe to me 3 times. And 3 times I said no, but you can't say no 4 times according to ritual. And so I said on the 4th time, I accepted the pipe and the responsibility of being the Sundance chief in 1995. Well, part of the responsibilities was to get the grounds ready for a Sundance ceremony, which meant we had to go on fast in order to cleanse our bodies out, in order to try to go through spiritual fasting, in order to get in touch with our spiritual self, and possibly to have visions about what we're going to do in the Sundance. And so I was getting all the young men and the young women ready for their fast and preparing them for that time, for a sacred ceremonial time. Now, it so happens that while we were preparing the grounds, in the land that we were preparing these grounds there was a guy by the name of Lyle James who was a rancher who had 2,000 head of cattle that he was grazing under fee simple title in that area. Now, what Lyle James in 1994, when we were Sundancing, the cows would come during the course of the dance, and at nighttime, they would come and defecate on the Sundance grounds. There was no fence there. And then at nighttime, the bull was going around, and there was just a lot of cow and bull activity going on all night long. So this was like disrupting the ceremony. So now, there's actually 3 sides of a fence, but the fourth side of the fence that would have had the Sundance within the parameters of the 4 sides of this fence was a wooden stake fence that had been broken down. So I told a lot of the young men, look, let's take these Sundance poles, let's get the old one out of there, let's build a fence, build a gate so that the rancher can egress and access cows going to water by the lake. And I said, well, we want to put this up so we can stop the cow pies and all the cow activity at night from interrupting the ceremony. So we did that, and when we did that, the rancher by the name of Lyle James decided that what we were doing was establishing a land claims. Now, that's not what we were doing. We were holding ceremony. But he thought we were initiating a territorial imperative. And so subsequently, he started meeting with the RCMP behind the scenes. And he wanted to have us evicted. Now, the RCMP told him, no, you cannot evict them because it is contentious. We don't have the jurisdiction to convict those people or to remove them. So you're going to have to create an incident in order to justify us coming in to serve them notice to evict. So what happened was Lyle James decided to send in 12 of his cowboys, some on horseback, and others in 4 pickups, 4x4s. One day, while I was over here in Hinton, and left basically a skeleton crew over there to clean up the area and get things prepared for the Sundance in July of 1995, I got a call from the son of the medicine man named Harold Stevens. Harold frantically said that cowhands had come in to the camp. One guy this was a good day to string up some red niggas. Other ones pulled out their guns and threatened to kill people in the camp if they didn't evict right away. Somebody grabbed an eviction notice and put it on the top of the spear, which is a sacred spear with the 30 eagle feathers, and said that you had to be evicted by noon, and if everybody wasn't gone by noon, there was going to be some serious consequences. Somebody was going to get hurt, somebody was going to get killed. Point blank. What's the meaning? When things really got blown out of, when things really got blown up, the media never ever reported that fact. That we were accosted by cowhands with guns. So when this guy, the medicine man's son called me and says, hey, we've got trouble here. What are we going to do? And then I called up, I said, okay, don't worry about it. I said, hold up. I said, I'll call Wolverine and see what he thinks, what's happening. Get somebody up there to see what's happening. So when I called Wolverine, I said, hey, there's trouble up there at the lake. I said, they're being accosted, they're being threatened with guns. So Wolverine said to me, he says, what should I do? I said, well, get a handful of guys and go up there and see what's going on. He said, should I take any equipment? And truthfully speaking, as a Sundance chief, I said, yes. I said, because the RCMP is putting them up to do it. Because they say they don't have jurisdiction. Now, we're not going to abandon the fact that there is a whole question of title there. Since they introduced the fact, since they introduced the whole question of eviction, at that point, we said, who has the right to evict who? Now we have the whole question of title. Because by this time, Wolverine, myself, and others were very well briefed on the whole question of international, constitutional, imperial, as well as papal law, as well as our own dying of law, our own natural laws as Native people. So in other words, I think it's very important to stress at this time to do a capsule of what the law is that we stood on. We said, according to international constitutional law, we had the right to evict them, since they made it a jurisdiction issue. And since the police were backing the jurisdiction issue that they created, we had to give definition to it. So then, once again, as Sundance chief, I had to make a decision, and I tried to make that decision based on the rule of law. And when we engaged the opposition on the whole question of title, I made it very clear to all of the lawyers up there at that time that we were in a strictly defensive posture, that we are not out looking to get into any kind of blood battle shootouts, that we are here for a purpose to preserve ceremony and a way of life. And the whole question of the title had to be exemplified. Of course, it could not get any exemplified in a true, unbiased way in the courts. And so we said, if we're going to hold the grounds in a defensive posture, we're going to have to get the media and the international community to hear what we're saying when we make this defensive stance. Because up until this point, the rule of law was really nothing but a rule of joke or a very cruel hoax that was not being lived up to. What is the rule of law that we stood on? Simple, in a very simple understanding of the law, which every human being can understand if told in a very clear, concise fashion. We go right back to the year 1492. Well, actually, we go a couple years later, 1497. The Vatican, who at that time had basically, after the expeditions of Columbus and other Spanish and Portuguese explorers, had basically given away the whole Western Hemisphere to the Spanish and the Portuguese, until later on the British and the French decided they were going to fight for title here in our country and our territories. But at first, they gave it all away to the Spanish and to the Portuguese. 1497, The Pope at that time created a papal bull called Terra Nullius. Terra Nullius is a Latin term meaning land not in the possession of human beings. Based on the description of who we were by the Spanish explorers, the Vatican said that we weren't human beings, but in fact we were animals. We weren't possessed of a soul. And since we didn't have a soul, it was okay to one, to hunt us and kill us like animals in the wild, and two, and most important, you did not have to enter into a treaty with us. Any level of property relationships, because you cannot enter into property relationships with an animal. So that was the justification for colonialism, for colonizing these territories, and it was given a moral imperative by the church. Then, moving down in history, looking at the effects of all of this particular concept, the Terra Nullius, the Spanish conquistadors killing hundreds of thousands of native people, the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas in Central America. There was a missionary who had a big heart and great love and compassion in the true sense of Christian compassion, by the name of Bartholomew de las Casas. Bartholomew de las Casas pleaded with Pope Paul III to rescind the terms of the 1497 Terra Nullius Papal Bull. After wrestling with it for a bit, Pope Paul III came out with the 1537 Papal Bull Sublimis Deus. Now, that basically meant is they just reversed the terms of the 1497 and said that we were highly evolved intellectual human beings with great civilizations that had been devised over thousands of years, and subsequently any European nation coming within our territories henceforth, which included Great Britain and France, would have to enter into property relationships with us. That was the basis. That Sublimis Deus was the basis of all treaty law and international law as well as constitutional law to date. That was the moral heart and soul of treaty negotiations that go on to this very day. Now, moving along in history, in 1704, there was a big dispute between the Mohegan Indian Nation in the state of Connecticut and the representatives of the state of Connecticut who were seeking to acquire something like 4.5 million acres of Mohegan land. The Mohegans put up a big contention and said that they would not give that land up. They had already given up too much land already that had been seized illegally from them. So the state of Connecticut wanted to take them to court, one of their own courts. The Mohegan chief said, no, your courts would be biased against us. They will rule against us. We are looking for a third party adjudicator. So what the Mohegan Indian did, what the chiefs did, is they submitted a proposal for the Queen of England at that time, who was Queen Anne, and asked her to intervene on this land dispute. Queen Anne established a Privy Council and set up the Queen Anne's Court, and eventually ruled in favor of the Mohegan Indians. 1704. It was called the Order and Council of March 1704. It was a landmark decision that has never been rescinded or appealed to today. Then moving down in history a little further, there was still constant encroachment, and by this time the British and the French had already made their way into this country, and at this time there had been oral agreements between Chief Pontiac and many of the different native nations throughout North America, and in those agreements they basically said that